So, y'all, for me, today has been a love fest. I just kind of bring some of my favorite people to this stage to share their knowledge with you. And I don't know if you're having as much fun as I am, but this is just like a mountaintop experience for me. So, Shelly, thank you so much for agreeing to this and for being such a good sport.
Thank you, Denise. So I will tell you, as we often are, we're really busy in our lives, and I had printed out the agenda for this and had not looked at it. And last night, got it out in my hotel room and looked at it for the first time, and I said, oh, good gosh. What is listed for me on this agenda is not what I'm presenting on. So first of all, let me go ahead and just apologize for that. I will talk about that some, but when Denise called me and asked me to speak on this, I didn't want to do it, first of all. And I said, Denise, I don't think I can do that. She said, yes, you can. Denise, number one, can't talk that long to anyone because they're going to be bored out of their mind. I will go ahead and just have a disclaimer. I'm probably the person on the Dyslexia Advisory Council who knows the least about dyslexia. I have not been MSLE trained. I don't have those fancy CALT letters behind my name. I've never taught a child to read. Okay? This, you can't really see the letters on that beautiful dirt road picture I put up there, but Reflections on a Journey. What I do have is a passion for helping kids to read. So many of you have that personal connection. You have a child who is dyslexic, and that's how you got into the world of dyslexia. And so what I know is we've listened to Robin Lamonis, and how hard is it to go after listening to her all day? She is fabulous, and what they've done in Mississippi is amazing. And so when Denise and I were talking about today, she said, you know, people are going to be depressed after listening to Robin because we don't have a lot of those things in place. Okay? And she said, and I need you to remind everyone where we started. And so I'm about as good of an example of starting at the bottom in the world of dyslexia, and I'm not much higher on it, but I have traveled a little ways down it. So that's kind of how I feel like in this group of people who do dyslexia all day. Like, someone take me with them because I'm so not qualified. You know, and as she said, I currently serve a district with 56 schools and 36,000 children. So that is a daunting task. And not that we're ever proud of that, but we have struggling schools. So when the state report card came out last year, we had 14 with D's and F's on the report card. So we have lots of work to do in Jefferson County. Okay, so on this journey from nothing in the state, okay, to where we are right now, it is not always a pretty road. It is, sometimes you can't even see the road. It just looks like a bunch of trees. Okay? And so my personal journey began as a teacher in Jefferson County schools. I was a high school English teacher, and I would get kids in 10th and 11th grade, and they couldn't read. And I had no clue how to help those kids. None. I was supposed to be teaching Shakespeare to them, and they can't read cat. And so, you know, I didn't know what to do with them. When you're teaching over 100 kids a day, you know, fortunately there was one special ed teacher in the building, and she could pull kids and she could teach them some things, but I couldn't do it. I didn't know how to do it. So fast forward, finished my doctorate, and I landed in Hayden, Alabama. Okay, and I landed in an elementary and middle school. And in that, this is when I began to know Denise. I was the assistant principal. I served 1,200 students a day. Crazy, crazy. But at that point, I at least was around people who knew how to teach kids to read. So I started reading and I started learning. And that is a hard journey. If you don't know anything about teaching kids to read, being thrown into the primary grades. So I will tell you that we started when I first arrived there, we were getting the Dibbles test. And everyone knows what the Dibbles test is, but that was when we were really new at it, and our scores were awful. Our teachers thought it was a joke. I can remember sitting somewhere and listening to one of them make fun of how stupid it was that we were asking kids to read these nonsense words. Okay? And I'll have to tell you, I think one of them, Julia and I were talking about this last night, one of them still feels like that. So there are still people who do not believe in Dibbles. I still believe in Dibbles. But our scores for our school, we were about 30% benchmark. Awful. But you know what? We didn't even care. We didn't know what a big deal it was for our kids not to do well on this test. So the great thing happened, which was the Alabama Reading Initiative came into our school. So there are people from the Alabama Reading Initiative here today. Would y'all stand up? Let's give them a big hand. And I firmly believe, okay, what the Alabama Reading Initiative did changed what we've done in the state of Alabama like few other things have ever done. Okay. When they came in, they helped us learn how to teach kids to read. When they taught us, and what we did is we spent 2 weeks one summer, and they modeled with kids, and we watched them. And all of a sudden, Dibbles made sense. Okay, and so in the course of a few years, we went from 30% benchmark to 95% benchmark. And so what they did changed the way that we taught, the way we analyzed our data, and I wish I could tell you, that was it. That's all it took. They came in and they sprinkled fairy dust, and we all lived happily ever after. Okay, but anyone who's ever led a change in a school knows that nothing is that easy. Okay, I remember when we were going through this process how hard it was. We would have data meetings and teachers would scream and cry and they would run out of the room. People were mad, they hated your guts. Oh, it was just traumatic. And so, but each day we got a little bit better and we persevered. And they gave us some really incredible tools. We had a school-based coach, okay? She's sitting here in this room, the one that Hayden Elementary had. And we had a principal coach. Okay? And I still, in fact, I talked to her on the way down here yesterday. She's still a huge part of my life. So they changed the way that we did education in Alabama. So the part that happens, though, was some kids still couldn't read. We were doing everything that we'd been taught to do. We were doing a double dose. We were doing a triple dose. These kids' parents were doing everything that we told them to do. The kids were trying hard. Our teachers were trying hard. And they still couldn't read. And that's frustrating. that is the hardest thing. And if you are a parent of a dyslexic child, you know how hard it is to watch them struggle. So I was fortunate enough to have a parent whose child was dyslexic, was in our school system. They received special education services. If you're a special education teacher or director, hey, you know what a due process is. Hey, due processes are not fun things, but the result of that parent was that she brought Denise Gibbs into my life and into the life of our school. Our dyslexia parents have really had to fight for their kids. And that is one of the things that I regret. And they're still fighting. I wish that I could say that as a state, we are to the point where parents are getting what they need for their kids. But I'm afraid that they are not. But one of the things that has really helped our state is when Scottish Rites, and I was very pleased that we recognized both them and what Mr. Burfitt did earlier today, because what they did in hiring Denise Gibbs to come and provide PD, and y'all, she was not kidding. She would come and spend entire days with me at Hayden Elementary School, and I could not get over that it was free. They paid for her to come and work with schools at no cost to them. Because if you know anything about Blount County, we were poor, we didn't have any extra money, and she did that. So one of the greatest gifts that she did was to teach me about dyslexia. She taught me to test kids for dyslexia, and we tested all of our students that were struggling readers. And that happened for many years. Denise, would you stand up? Okay, you're actually going to have to come up here on stage. So if you don't know much about Denise Gibbs, okay, she started out as a professor in communication science and disorders at the University of Montevallo before becoming the director of Alabama's Scottish Rite Foundation Learning Centers. She taught at Montevallo for 25 years, retired, and then became the director of Alabama Scottish Rites. She has written numerous books on RTI and dyslexia, and she is the foremost authority on dyslexia in the state of Alabama. So we are presenting her with a Lifetime Achievement Award today for her work on behalf of the children of Alabama. And I am convinced that the dyslexia movement in Alabama would not be where it is today without Denise Gibbs. She did not know we were doing that, so. Which is the reason we had to hide it and not tell her. Oh, and there were all my cute pictures of Denise, so. Sorry, I was trying to let them get to the stage and then got myself off task. Fortunately, over the years, I not only have had the pleasure of working with Denise, but she has become a friend and a mentor. Awesome. So back to Hayden Elementary, we were testing students, and I will tell you, I learned so much about dyslexia from testing students. And like I said, I haven't gone through all of the training, but I have sat and administered those tests to countless children. And so we would identify kids, and then we would have to figure out what in the world we're going to do with them. Okay, because there were no MSLE teachers in the state at that time, or if they were, they certainly were not in Hayden, Alabama. Okay, and so what we ended up with were you're laughing, okay? I so wish I looked everywhere to see if I could find a clip from one of those old videos, but we probably had 100 videotapes, and they were videotaped lessons from Alabama Scottish Rites, Texas Scottish Rites. Okay, it was an old video, and the lady was about 150, and the kids would always go, "How is she still alive?" She might not have been at the time we got those tapes, I don't know. Okay. And so we didn't have money, okay, but we found some money to buy the workbooks, and we bought this big paper, we ran it through the copier, okay, and we did an intervention with those kids, okay, and it wasn't perfect, but those kids made progress, and I so wish that they could have had the real thing. But it was better than nothing. And so I look back on it, and I know that we made a difference in some of those kids' lives. And I still have parents come up to me. I had one recently come up to me. I didn't recognize her. And she said, "Do you remember my daughter? She was in the dyslexia intervention program. She's at Wallace State right now finishing a nursing degree." So, our schools split, and like Denise said, I became the principal. And so we made copies of all those videotapes. We took them all over to the new school, and we kept going. And we learned a little bit more as we went. Okay? So many implications for dyslexia. Okay? Just trying to pull out some of the things that we learned during those times. The implications for our kids. Okay? And so, for instance, when we take kids into the special ed referral process, there's so many different implications. Denise just came to Jefferson County not long ago and talked to our psychometrist about this process. Okay? When we went through and tested kids, we found a little boy at Hayden Elementary School, and he had been classified MR, mentally retarded. When we tested his IQ, guess what his IQ was? Average. And so this family, this child, had been led to believe that something was terribly wrong with their child, and it wasn't. And so we learned that the IQ test that we give children when we take them through the special ed referral process makes a difference in the classification. So, if you take nothing else away from these 2 days, remember that we have to consider kids with dyslexia having a different type of IQ test. And a nonverbal IQ test may be the difference in looking at what really is their IQ level. The other piece that we took away was the early intervention. And when we first started with this, we didn't even test kids until the end of first grade, because we said, we've got to at least give them the instruction before we know whether they can't do it. Okay? And so just the picture, and I just had to pull pictures off the internet because I, of course, could not use pictures of real children, and I actually had a picture of this child personally, but we had all of the older siblings, and they weren't diagnosed. They'd been placed in special ed. but we knew that they couldn't read. And by the time the baby came along, we knew a little bit better. We knew when he came into kindergarten, okay, within the first week, I was sitting with that child in kindergarten and looking at the tendencies that he displayed. And we were able to intervene from just that first week. Okay? So we know now that that early intervention piece, okay, is so important. And so we continued on, and we realized that without fixing our core instruction, we could not intervene our way out of where we were, because we had an upside down triangle. Okay, and some of you, if you're at district level, know what an upside down triangle looks like. Maybe your school even is like that, where you have way too many kids who can't read. Okay. And you know, we were a great school, okay, or at least we thought we were a great school. But you know, we were a good school, and we had too many kids that couldn't read. And so again, and I think, it was alluded to, Robin talked about it, we have to go back and look at what our core instruction is, because we can address many of the issues that we're having. So in 2009, we had our first MSLE cohort. If you are an MSLE trained person, would you stand up? Let's give these people a big hand. That is a huge commitment of time and effort. That is a very difficult training. Okay? But the thing that it did for us as a state, I believe, is that it allowed us to see the science of reading. Okay? And even if you didn't go through it, I didn't go through that training, but it allowed us to see what could happen when kids had the right instruction. And so, it's hard sometimes, because we've had some of those people who are MSLE trained who went on to leadership positions. And people said, well, see, that's one of the reasons we don't even need this, because people don't stay in place and help kids. Well, I would have to say just the opposite. When we take people with that skill set and we put them in positions of leadership, they do amazing things. So if you are MSLE trained and in a position of leadership, I want you to stand up. All right, a few people. I honestly feel like we need more people in positions of leadership who have this training. How fabulous would it be if the people leading our schools knew the kind of instruction that our kids needed? So the state was also on this journey. Okay? That year, we started having at Mega Conference presentations on dyslexia. Okay? If you've ever presented at Mega Conference, okay, on dyslexia, would you stand up? People are going, I'm tired of standing up, but there's quite a few people. And there have been so many people who have worked on forwarding dyslexia in this state. So, not to say, and I don't even necessarily know all of these people, but I know of them, okay? The Dyslexia Friends, Alabama Game Changers, Decoding Dyslexia, Roundtable Solutions, okay? The work of all of these people manifested itself in lobbying our state board members and our state legislators. Okay? And what it led to was the formation of the Dyslexia Advisory Council, and I am a member of that council. And again, I say that I'm the one who knows the least on that council. But what an opportunity to work with people whose passion and knowledge for helping kids in this state. So, I'm very proud to be a part of that. Okay. And which led to the passage of the dyslexia amendments in 2015. Okay. And this picture is, I believe, the day that it was passed at the state board meeting. And as usual, I am not in the picture. I'm always at that point, you know, sometimes it's hard to get to Montgomery for these meetings. So one of the things that came out of that is the Dyslexia Resource Guide. You know, and we will never know how many people across this state have benefited from just having this available. Okay? It has so many resources, and just having something to where people can go find information is such a help. So on my personal journey, and Denise said that earlier, I was made assistant superintendent in a school district. Had about 9,000 kids, 16 schools. And I was really fortunate when I went there is that they had already started, because the elementary curriculum coordinator had a dyslexic child. So she had already started that work. But what we were able to do was by Spire for every school in the district. Okay? Having resources to work with kids is so essential. We went through and we screened every low-performing reader in the district. And it is amazing to me how many kids are in that bottom quartile, and no one has ever really looked at what are their specific difficulties. So when you start, when you screen kids now, you know what it is that they're struggling with. And so many of our high school students, one of the biggest things that we found is they didn't know sight words. Okay? We stopped teaching sight words lots of times in about first grade. Okay? And our kids in high school still struggle with them. It's really sad. The other thing that we did was we had meetings, and when we went through and we screened and a kid was identified as having those tendencies, we brought those parents in and we had conversations with them. So powerful, because those parents knew something was wrong, but no one had ever told them about dyslexia, many of them. And so in the conversation earlier about, you know, we have places where people don't know about dyslexia, and we have places where lots of people know about dyslexia. Okay? It doesn't really matter, because that conversation is very different when it's your child. So we started with the intervention when I first got there, but then we really started going back and looking at how do you change the core. Okay? So we were able to implement, to put in phonics first in kindergarten and first grade. Now in the meantime, I had convinced Julia Wall to follow me from Blount County to Limestone County. Okay? And she is still there doing the good work. And I believe Julia has a second grade pilot going right now. Okay? And so when we start talking about hundreds of children receiving multisensory instruction from kindergarten and first grade, then that is when we see core instruction looking like it needs to, for that triangle to be a triangle. Okay? Not some kind of polygon that I don't know the shape of it. Skipped my side. So, and as Denise also said, then I had the opportunity to go to Jefferson County. This is my second school year in Jefferson, and huge challenges there. Huge challenges. Okay. We have those things that Nick Moore was talking about this morning with kids who come to us so far behind. No books in their home. Huge vocabulary gaps. Okay. It is hard to move kids when the knowledge, they don't know, even when you teach them to decode a word, they don't even know what it is. So, it is not just about one piece, it's about that whole puzzle, and that is very difficult to fix. We did this fall train all of our kindergarten and first grade teachers in Phonics First. So in Limestone County, I don't know, Julia, how many kids are in a grade level. In Jefferson County, that is 3,000 kids in a grade level. So this fall, we trained teachers for 6,000 students for multisensory phonics. And again, like I said about any change effort, it is hard, okay? Because there are still some people who probably are not doing it, but I am very fortunate to work in a place that when we went to our Board of Education and our superintendent, and the side of having 350 people to train this fall that's a lot of money. So when you go to them and say, I need $500,000 for this training, and they give it to you, amazing. Okay. And so I do want to shout out to my superintendent and our board for doing that. And so we can talk, we're going to do a panel, which is actually what I think I was supposed to have done on that agenda. And the other thing that we've done this year is implement SPIRE for our special ed population. And so there are so many pieces to this dyslexia puzzle. And I don't know that we are there yet, but we have committed to doing whatever it takes. So the exciting thing is, as a state, we are continuing to move this forward. And when I look at what Robin talked about, all of the different things that Mississippi has done, okay, it is easy to think we have not come far enough, and we haven't. But when I look back at when I first met Denise Gibbs, okay, we've come a long way. Okay? We didn't have MSLE. We didn't have multisensory programs in our schools. Okay? We didn't have the amendments. We didn't have a dyslexia resource guide. We did not have so many of the things that we have. We didn't have a conference like this. Okay? So we, as a state, are headed in the right direction. So I think the question is always, where are we going? We listened to Nick Moore this morning talk about what the governor's doing. There are so many people working to move this forward. And that is honestly really hard because at any given point, one group is on one page, okay, another group is on another page, and maybe even this group is on the same page but a different paragraph. Okay? And so I think that the challenge for us going forward is, how do we harness the collective capacity of all of the people who care so passionately about the kids in our state? And I think that that always comes back, for me, is seeking the other people's perspectives. So I'm going to ask you, we had, I can't remember who earlier asked for parents of a dyslexic child to raise their hand. Would y'all do that for me? Okay, we've got something. I was trying to decide if we had enough people to do what I was going to do next. So in a moment, okay, I want us to get up and connect with each other, but here's how I want us to do it. If you're the parent of a dyslexic child, okay, I want you to identify yourself by making, I have to maneuver the microphone, a P. Okay? And if you are a teacher or administrator, form a T. Okay? And if you're both, then I don't have nearly as many parents as I do teachers, so if you're a parent, please go with the parent one. But I think that we have to continue to seek out those other perspectives, okay? Because if you are a teacher, you can be passionate, okay? But living with, just like Robin said, living with a dyslexic child, or even having dyslexia yourself, okay, there is no amount of being in the classroom with a child that will give you the insight that that parent does. So in a few minutes, okay, and I'm going to say connect, and then if you would go find someone who has a different letter than you do, and talk to them about your journey into dyslexia. Because some of you may be at the beginning of this journey, some of you may have traveled a long way, okay? But I still think that there is value in all of us seeking out those other perspectives, because at some point, if we're to continue down this road together, we have to find the commonalities. Because for me, the commonality is looking for what's best for the kids in this state. And I truly believe that we can do that when we work together. Because this road is not paved yet. Okay? That's what our job is to come. And we certainly would like for it to be paved so that it's easier to get down. Because right now, okay, there are still some big potholes. Okay? When we listen to families and we listen to kids, and we've got the amendments in place, and I wish I could say that that had fixed everything, but for many of our families and our kids, it hasn't. Okay? And so we've got still a lot of work to do. So, okay, make your letter, okay, and find someone with a different letter and talk.